It's this, the Wolverine tank from Archon Studios. Oh, you want me to tell you about it? Okay. Well, my name's Guy, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and I just want to make one thing really clear. I paid for this tank. Archon Studios didn't give it to me for free, this isn't a review version, this video is not sponsored by them. It is sponsored by Skillshare, but I'll talk to you more about that in a minute. I picked up this tank as part of my hobby haul from this year's UK Games Expo. You might have already seen it in a recap video I made last month. And I thought it was too good to be true. A hard plastic heroic scale tank kit for 20 quid. That's like €24, $26, or I don't know, about 900 Aussie dollary dues. And I thought, wow, this must be some kind of half price event exclusive, because this kit looks big. And it kind of was, but yeah, not half price. The list price on the Archon website is only 27 quid. Actual retailers are selling it for about 24. Just a reminder, that's for a hard plastic heroic scale tank model kit. Now, it might not have the ultra crispy detail of newer Games Workshop kits, it kind of feels more like something they'd have produced in the early noughties, but assembly was pretty straightforward and the instructions are digital and color coded, which is nice. All you get is the box and the tank, and you use every single bit of the sprue to make this thing, no spares. So just from the get-go, we're talking about a tenner less than a Warhammer Rhino, almost half the price of funkier tanks like the Predator and the Whirlwind and the mighty Leman Russ, and 1/3 the price of bigger mechanized units like the Land Raider and the Rogel Dawn. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. How big are his hands? Let's just do a size comparison. Here I have a couple of Warhammer tanks to show you how this thing measures up. So the Wolverine versus a Rhino. It's much chunkier. You might be thinking it's too big for a Rhino, and yeah, maybe you're right, but I mean, you probably want to remove the turret, maybe put a sheet of plasticard over it to cover the hole, stick a couple of your old spare bolters on the front somewhere, paint it up to match your Marines, and I reckon this would be a pretty good proxy. At least it looks like it could actually fit a squad of Astartes inside. You can also build it with the rear door movable too, but yeah, I glued mine closed because I can't be fucked. How does it size up against the long-serving Leman Russ? Surprisingly well. The Wolverine is certainly the beefier offering. Even though this particular Leman Russ has obviously been looted for my Orcs army, you get an idea of the size for the sake of comparison. Again, a little on the large side for a direct proxy, but I can live with that. And we've obviously got the main battle cannon covered, and what a cannon. You can obviously run this as a bare bones Leman Russ, but I mean, it's 10th edition now and the sponsons and pintle weapons are free, so why would you not add them? I mean, with a little imagination, you could just say that there's some gunners inside pointing their heavy bolters or heavy flamers out of the gun ports here. Are they gun ports or are they scream canisters? This might be perfect for all the folk out there like me, kit bashers with little organizer boxes full of bits from previous projects, but obviously that's no good for people wanting to make a proxy tank army from scratch with no spares. Well, lucky you, because there are dozens of awesome third-party companies out there like Cromlech, Victoria Miniatures, Mortian, Beyond the Tabletop, who make loads of cool extra tank bits like sponsons. 3D printing is obviously a good option here too. Rather than printing off the whole tank, just print off some spare guns and sponsons. That's a way smaller ask for your friend who has a 3D printer too. There's so many awesome sculptors out there who make Warhammer compatible tank parts. But if you want to get a bit more creative and go back to modelling basics, you could always do something like Plastic Skulls did in their awesome video called Alternatives to Side Sponsons. If you're a Guard fan, you should go check out all of their videos because they are top notch. I'm sad to see they haven't uploaded for about a year though. Now you might be looking at this and thinking, whoa, that is way too fiddly, I'm just a beginner, I could never do something like that. And I'm just going to come out and say it. You're wrong. You can. Everyone was a beginner at some point. You have it in you to learn almost anything, especially with the help of this video's sponsor, Skillshare. Come on, that was pretty smooth, right? Skillshare is an online creative learning platform with thousands of video classes on hundreds of topics. I personally use it all the time. I've used it to brush up on drawing and digital illustrations, and I've turned those skills into products that I was able to sell because I made a thing that was good by improving my skills. I mean, what more do you want? Oh, you do want more? How about new bookable one-on-one sessions with professionals in their field? That's pretty cool, but I know what you're thinking. You're on YouTube, you can find tons of free tutorials right here. And yeah, I make loads of them for miniature painting, but you know as well as I do that YouTube tutorials can be a little bit hit and miss. The main benefit of Skillshare for me was how concise and to the point everything is. There's no fluff, no hyperbole, no cliffhangers, no video sponsors. In every class I've watched so far, there's never a wasted moment, so you can make the most of your time and expand your skill set without getting frustrated. If you want to give Skillshare a try, and I fully recommend you do, the first 500 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare on me. Get started today, and I promise you won't regret it. Where was I? Leman Russ. Not a perfect proxy. The next tank I can size the Wolverine up to is the new Imperial Guard Rogel Dawn, albeit a slightly customized one. This is actually my pal Steve's tank, and he's been adding his own unique designs to it. The boy can't just buy a kit, build it and paint it, he has to make a full conversion upgrade system for it. Anyway, he's a genius, but that's not what we're talking about here. The chassis is largely unchanged, mostly just different guns, and well, we're not a million miles off. The Wolverine is a little bit smaller, but size-wise you could absolutely use this as a proxy for casual fun games. Most opponents will not care at all. The thing that might really break the immersion though is that the Wolverine only has a main battle cannon and maybe 2 gun ports, but the Rogel Dawn has something like 13 weapons, which I thought was frankly absurd and unrealistic when I first saw it, but then I heard about the United States M2 medium tank, which had a main turret and 9 machine guns. So, shows what I know. So, a proxy for the Dawn? Maybe. Honestly, it's up to you. I'm not your boss, you do what you want. Anyway, let's do a quick pros and cons roundup of the kit, and then I'm gonna get some paint on this thing. First, the positives. Obviously, as I've already said, the price is outrageously good. There are lots of fun details too, an optional interior, hatches that open, mines, auxiliary fuel tanks, smoke launchers, tools, loads of bits and bobs. It's easy to customize, lots of flat spaces to add extra spares, third-party or 3D printed stuff. And speaking of which, the turret connection point is the same as the Space Marine vehicles, so you can get a little bit creative if you want a different chassis for your cool Whirlwind or Predator weapons. Detail and kit quality is pretty good. It feels like a proper Warhammer tank. It doesn't feel like a kid's toy, it's nice and weighty and solid. I also quite like the fact that it saves on paper with digital instructions. That's a pretty cool touch in my opinion. And also, there's no dawn hole. And now for some negatives. Obviously, as I've said, it only has 1 gun, the main turret, and maybe 2 more in the gun ports, but that is it. There's also no perfect analog for any Warhammer tank, really. Everything's a little bit too big or a little bit too small that has more guns, so you're gonna have to use a little bit of creativity here. Some of the assembly was a little bit fiddly, the tracks were a bit of a pain to get to sit level, and the headlight guards only have 1 small contact point for their size, which is a little bit strange. And also, obviously, the big one is that this is not an official Games Workshop kit. But does that matter? For 80% of you watching, no, it doesn't. Do not let a multi-billion-pound company dictate how to have fun with your toys. Only 1 in 5 viewers of this channel have ever played at a Games Workshop store or at an official tournament, which is the only place you're not really allowed to use non-Games Workshop models. So if you're just playing casual games like I do, you can use this to proxy for pretty much any of the tanks I just showed you. You're just gonna have to use a little bit of imagination. You are playing a game after all, having fun with your friends. Life's short, money's tight at the moment. Use the cheap tank and enjoy yourself. Should we get some paint on it? Now I'm not going to go crazy here, just following the official Games Workshop Cadian tank colour scheme fairly closely so you can get a realistic idea of whether or not this could pass for a Warhammer tank. I started off with this trench brown primer from the Colourforge as it'll be quite sympathetic to the other colours I'll be using. I then gave the whole thing a very big, quick overbrush with Zandri dust. After that, I smushed lots of blue tack sausages all over the tank, trying to make random camouflage patterns. Where the turret connects, I tried to keep the pattern going in its forward-facing position so it looked a bit more like realistic tank camouflage patterns. After that, I airbrushed on some Castellan green all over, going for 2 thin coats to ensure a pretty even smooth coverage. After that was dry, I peeled off the blue tack to reveal the camo stripes. Nice. Next, a really messy recess shade in the nooks and crannies and all around the rivets and detailed parts using Agrax Earthshade. I then tidied up any areas that I was way too messy with the original Zandri dust and Castellan green paints. Next, a light dry brush with some off-white paint just to catch some of those edges, and then to block in all of the metal stuff that isn't tracks, I used this fancy French blue from AK, kind of slightly pinky bluey grey, which is nice. A quick base coat on all the stuff like mines, fuel tanks, ladders, exhausts, and tools. For the tracks, I used Broadsword Silver Speed Paint. It flows nicely, which is important for all the fiddly recesses of the tracks, but also isn't too bright and bold. I've actually been keen to try out this new shade paint from AK as well, Black Knight. I've heard a couple of people say it's like souped up Nuln Oil. I mean, out of the pot, this is awful. Let's dilute it a little bit. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit more usable. It's not really what I expected at all, though, from the description. And yes, I shook up tons. I used my vortex mixer and everything. Maybe it dries differently? I'll give all the grey parts a quick coat of this and see what it looks like. I don't really like it. Has anyone out there had any success with this? Let me know in the comments. I reinforced some areas of the grey with the original French blue, and also added a bit of off-white into the French blue to pick out some highlight areas on the grey parts too. I then added some more precise recess shading with Nuln Oil Gloss. Yeah, this is the stuff. What a great product. Discontinued. Great. I slathered this all over the tracks too, and then I base coated the fabric thing on the turret and the random block of wood on the back of the tank. Any tank buffs out there know what this is for? I then stippled on some of this dark brown onto the bottom of the tank and around the tracks to simulate muddy build-up. Some Nuln Oil on the tracks too to darken down the recesses, and then a little dry brush with Zandri dust just to bring out the texture. Now don't worry, the base coat is not still wet, it's the gloss finish of that Nuln Oil still shining. Alright, it's transfer time. This is the thing that's going to really help sell the Warhammer look. I sliced off some Cadian gates, Cadia lettering, and Aquilas, soaked them in some water for a couple of minutes on my palette, and carefully laid them in place. Back to the dark brown now, and we're going to sponge them onto random corners and areas that look like they'd get a bit bashed about, and then use a bright silver paint to tap into the areas inside the dark brown bits to make it look like the paint has chipped right down to the bare metal. Time to paint those headlights. I squished blue tack to the front of the light covers to stop them getting sprayed too, and then gave the lights themselves a quick base coat with an off-white paint just to make the upcoming white airbrush cover a bit faster on those particular bits. And then, yeah, some very gentle, very little tiny spurts of white through the airbrush, tiny puff here, very light layers building up to avoid streaks pooling and sputtering. I then gave the lights and the lit areas around it a light coat of diluted Guilliman blue. I love this glaze. I can't believe Games Workshop discontinued it. I'm still bitter 5 years on. Okay, now let's give the whole thing a few light coats of varnish to knock off the shiny Nuln Oil residue, dull down the sheen off the transfers, and make everything just look a bit more cohesive. Just for a minute, suspend disbelief, and imagine if Games Workshop just announced this as a new Warhammer model. Slightly smaller than a Rogel Dawn, maybe like the big brother of a Chimera, with the transport capacity for a squad of shock troops and a battle cannon like a Leman Russ. All that for 25 quid. That would fly off the shelves. So for those 4 in 5 people who aren't interested in playing at Warhammer stores or in official tournaments, it honestly doesn't matter that it's not a real Games Workshop model. Have some fun. Paint some cool models. Play some fun games. That's what this hobby is about. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Now, I don't collect Imperial Guards, so rather than just have this tank sit in my cabinet for the next few years, I'd much rather someone out there have it and actually use it in their games. So I put it on eBay, it's at £1 starting bid, it's got no reserve, and I'll do free worldwide shipping. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you've had a good week and that life is treating you well. Massive thanks to Skillshare for supporting this video too. Don't forget to check out the link in the video description for a free month of Skillshare on me, and also for all the other bits and bobs that I mentioned in this video too, as well as our Midwinter Minis merch store, and links to ways that you can support the channel too, whether that's Patreon, so you could have your name displayed at the end of the videos, just like these awesome people right now. There's also stuff like PayPal donation links, and even Cameo too. Happy hobbying, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.